All right, welcome to Phishing for You and Your Grandma. This is a learning talk for anybody that might not be the best at phishing, that hopefully you can understand and also that your grandma would understand. My name is Sarah Norris. I'm a pen tester at TrustedSec. I started maybe a year ago, so I'm still in the process of learning things, and thankfully I get to work with a group of people that are really smart. So I graduated from Utica College in cybersecurity and forensics, and this is my first talk at Derbycon. Oh, yeah. I'll let you do it.
Let me try to be helpful here.
Thank you. Is that better? If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm Norris Ponydeer. And if you want to see some really dank memes, you can follow me on Instagram. So this talk is for anyone, like I said, that hasn't done a ton of phishing and wants to know what some of the common roadblocks are and how to be more successful. So in this room, who has done a phishing campaign successfully? Okay, so some of you. So this might be familiar. But basically I'm going to go over the mistakes that I've made and some caveats that I've run into. So phishing is easy, right? You just pick a target, send them an email, and of course they're going to fall for it, and then you get all their shells and creds, and it's great. But it's not always super easy. So hopefully these things will make your life a little bit easier. So all we need is a pretext that gives our target a sense of urgency, and that will hopefully impact them so that they actually want to do something about it. An effective payload, a phishing site, and then an email that makes it to their inbox, because we don't want them having to scour through spam to find it. So imagine you pick a target. You made a really great pretext that you just know they're going to fall for, and you wait for the shells and the creds, but they never come. So what happened? At this point, there's a lot of things that could have happened, but we're going to assume that your target never saw your email. So you just wasted a bunch of time. So at this point, in my experience, there's a couple of things that you want to check. So it could have been that maybe they have an email gateway that flagged on something that you put in the subject line of your email. Maybe the domain you picked is actually already blacklisted because it's evil and you're an evil person also. Maybe the IP that you're using to host your mail server is also blacklisted. So those are things that you can check on, like MX Toolbox, or there's probably some other sites that do it as well. But let's just say, okay, maybe it just went to spam, so what am I going to do now? So yep, there it is. It's in spam. It's really sad. It seems like Gmail just doesn't trust you. which is very, very sad. So what are we going to do about that? We find out that our domain isn't blacklisted, but it seems like since Gmail doesn't trust us for some reason, we need to authenticate ourselves as a sender. So the first thing that I would do is make a DKIM key. A tool that I find very helpful is OpenDKIM. It's an open source implementation of Domain Keys Identified Mail Sender Authentication System. So this tool is super easy. You can generate a key in Linux. You just have to pick a selector. So in this case, I pick a selector grandma-secure. And my domain is fishgrandma.com, so I'm going to make those keys for that domain. So as you can see, once I generate those keys, it'll create for you a private key and a public key. It also creates for you a handy configuration file, so you're just going to go in and edit your domain, edit the key file with the path to that private key, and then type in the same selector that you used to generate those keys. Then you're going to save that and restart OpenDKIM, of course. Just reboot maybe 3 or 4 times. Make sure that it really sticks. And then go ahead and add that DKIM key to the public one to a DNS text file. And then for DKIM, you just need to put in the selector name, and then it's always ._domain key. And if you're using a subdomain, it's going to be .subdomain.domain. So At this point, you have your DKIM set up, but there's a couple other records that you need to make sure you have set up also. So I'm going to assume that you have your A record set up, your mail record set up, SBF, which is just your IP, and then you also can have DMARC, which works with DKIM, and it actually won't work without DKIM. So the DMARC record, since a lot of people aren't familiar with it, it just requires, there's 2 minimum requirements for it. You need at least a version and the policy. So there's a couple of things you can put for policy. You can quarantine, reject, or just do nothing. So I usually just put none for the policy and then version 1. And then it's always underscore DMARC. So it's pretty easy, right? So now we have all our records, and we're super excited to send it to our target again, because we just know that they're going to fall for it, and it's going to be great. And oh my gosh, it worked. So it made it to our inbox. And if you're testing this in Gmail, you can just make sure. You can either look at the headers if you're using something else, or you can look at the original message, and it'll show you if it's accepting your DKIM key, your DMARC, and your SBF. So we win. Yay, us and all our friends. Okay, so now we made it to our inbox. And what are we going to do next? So we want to work on our payload, because we want to make sure that we actually get those shells. So you don't always have to do this, but I like to ensure that I'm actually going to get that connection back. So we're going to go ahead and create an SSL cert. Has anybody in here used Let's Encrypt? Some people. Super easy, free, great to use. So with Let's Encrypt, you can use this script, certbot autos, and then I just do cert only, and then specify my web root and domain. So in this case, there's my web root, fishgrandma, domain, fishgrandma.com. And that's going to go ahead once it creates the cert for you. It's going to create this cert.pem, chain.pem, privkey.pem, and fullchain.pem. So we're going to, for the sake of our payload, yeah, go ahead.
If you didn't have access to Let's Encrypt, would you still take the time to do this?
If I didn't have access to Let's Encrypt, like get it through a different means?
It's more of a hypothetical. Goes to the extra snap one up for easy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how much I know about my target. If I know that I don't really need that, and that maybe they don't even have a proxy for outbound traffic or something, then it might not be necessary. But I also feel like when somebody goes to a phishing site and they see that HTTPS, like, secure connection for your website, then that makes it seem legitimate, right? Everything's fine, it's safe. But it's really up to you and how much you know about your target. So this is just what I prefer to use. Okay, so we have our SSL certificate. Oh, sorry, I was going to say. So we want to put together or smash together our cert and our priv key, and then we can just put that into a file called like full.pem, and we're going to use that with our, in this case, with our Metasploit handler. So we want to create a payload. In this example, I'm going to use Unicorn. Has anybody here used Unicorn? Yeah, some people. Yay. So I'm going to specify the type of payload, and I'm going to use Windows Meterpreter Reverse HTTPS. I have my domain in here, fishgrandma.com, 443, and then I'm going to make it an HTA file. HTA files are Windows files, and it is possible that they can be blocked on some systems, especially if they have like Windows Defender or like really good antivirus or something. And it does require that the user actually like clicks on it and then says save or run, what you usually see in a browser to run an executable. So there are some assumptions that you have to make when you're sending this out as a phish. But in this case, Unicorn is going to create unicorn.rc, launcher.hta, which is our actual HTA file that we're going to add to our phishing site so that when they log into our phishing site, it'll just automatically like download in the browser, and then hopefully they'll save it and run it. And then an index.html, but in this case, we're going to assume that we already have our own phishing site created, so we don't need that. So that unicorn.rc file is going to have everything that you need for running a handler. So it's just going to have all of these lines in it. Your payload, your listening host, which in our case is fishgrandma.com, listening port 443, and then the biggest ones to look at here are enable stage encoding true and handler SSL Cert. So that's where we're going to put the path to that full.pem that we smashed together with our cert. So make sure that path is specified correctly in there. And then you can just run that with MSF console-r unicorn.rc or whatever you want to call it. You can call it whatever you want. So now we have our handler running. We have our SSL cert. What are we going to do for a pretext? So when I say that I want a pretext that has impact and urgency, that really depends on how much you know about your target. But let's say you don't know too much about your target. In this case, these are steps for if you just want to send out like a mass phishing campaign. You just want to make sure it gets to everyone and just see how it goes. So some good resources for finding a good pretext are you can look at what some open court cases are for your person or for the company that you're targeting. News that's relevant to the target. So if you were doing like a campaign for Toys R Us, you could possibly use the fact that like they just filed for bankruptcy, just an example. Events that the target participates in, if they're throwing a conference, can say, oh, sorry, like we noticed that, your room isn't ready or something. We need you to fill out this form. I don't know. You just think outside of the box. So yeah, basically anything that you know that if an employee or your target opened the email, they'd say, okay, I need to do this right now. Because if they wait, they're probably not going to do it. And then last but not least, you want to have a good phishing site. So I'll just show you what the user would hopefully see. So this is my phishing site, fishgrandma.com, and I'm just a grandma, and I got an email about how I need to send my granddaughter some new pants. So I'm going to log in. All right, so there's my HTA file, and of course I would, if I was on my Windows machine, which I always am, I would launch that and hopefully create a shell back to me. But yeah, so for phishing sites, a lot of times, depending on what you're trying to do, you can literally just scour Google and come up with a good logo, either the company that you're targeting's logo or just something, that looks legitimate and pretty, and clone it. And then up here we have our very secure HTTPS, makes it look even more legitimate. And yeah, hopefully you get all the successes. Does anybody have any questions about the process? Yeah.
So do you ever find that even when you've got a really good pretext and you've established that the email has made it through, do you ever try to follow up with a phone call or something to really kind of drive it home?
Yeah, definitely. If I know that the email got to them and they're not clicking on it, yeah, following up with a phone call is a great way to handle it. I wouldn't do it the other way. I feel like when you call somebody and you can say, oh, I know you have this email in your inbox, it just makes you sound even more legitimate. So yeah, that's a really good way to say, can you just take 5 minutes to go click on this and maybe like do what I asked you to do in the email, especially if it's coming from somebody. So a lot of times you can look up somebody that works at your target and say the email is from them, like in your template or whatever, and then call as that person. So spoofing phone numbers isn't too difficult. Yes?
Do you use an automated toolkit, or do you manually craft the whole process on your own?
Sometimes I use tools for like sending out the email, but most of the stuff is done manually. Yeah.
You're not doing metrics per se, you're doing just the actual phishing.
Sorry, what was that?
Do you have any strategies for domain name generation to find folks successful for classes?
Anything that, you can always make it similar to whatever, something that the target trusts. And then if you can't get that domain, obviously, because it's being used, you can always try like adding in a 1 for an L or a 0 for an O, something like that. So just at quick glance, it'll look like something that they're familiar with. But for the most part, I just try to put in the name of something like a tool like Microsoft or email or secure, stuff that sounds like, oh, I trust that. It's secure. And sorry, your other question was about metrics?
So you're not using it for metrics, you're using it just for sending malware or something like that as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can take metrics too. Like you can count out, you can create text files and things like that to catch whatever people are typing into your website, just to see how many people click on it or how many people enter credentials. So the metrics part you can kind of do manually. Yes. I mean, I guess it depends on how much you know. You could do it all in less than a day. So it wouldn't take you that long. The DNS record generation is pretty easy. Like you can use OpenDKIM to create the keys and just copy and paste it in there. It does sometimes take up to 24 to 48 hours for certain things to propagate. Like if you wanted to set up reverse DNS or something, that might take a little bit longer. But otherwise, yeah, you can do everything on the fly. Does anyone have any other questions? No? Yes.
Yeah. So, when you all do like phishing engagements or something like that, what do you use like a measure of success for the phish? Like, so what I mean by that is, let's say there's a link in the email, and then the link goes to a page where you download something.
Right.
Is clicking that link, like obviously opening the email probably isn't.
Yeah, that's not such a big deal.
But like clicking the link versus like going to the site do you consider both of those successful, or just the latter? Like, how do you all tend to just?
I would consider clicking the link and actually following through with what the website is or what the email is requesting as a success. But the fact that they're clicking a link and going to your phishing site isn't great. Yeah. If they go there and then they're like, oh, this doesn't look legitimate, and then don't do anything, I would say that's a win on their side. So if they actually like put something in there and log in or double click on my payload or something, those are things that I would consider more of a success. Yeah.
Have you noticed any of your campaigns with your phishing site being tagged as a malicious site through various proxy?
Yeah, definitely. And that's just a matter of time. It's like you want to. That's why I try to do things quicker than slower. Like I don't want to have a domain up forever, and I try not to reuse them. But sometimes you just have to. That's why I was trying to drive home at the beginning when you see something wrong, like, oh, my email didn't make it there, I'm not getting anything. That's when I kind of do a little extra research to make sure my site hasn't been blacklisted or somebody hasn't tagged it as malicious, just because then even if you do all of this extra work, it's not going to matter. Then you're going to have to switch it out. So, yeah, it does happen. Yes.
Have you seen lack of reverse DNS entries cause problems or the extension go up? I know it's hard to kind of.
Yeah, not that often. If I see that I'm following through with all of these steps and I'm still not getting the email to them, and I've looked at like the headers and stuff and seen, okay, like it's not flagging on my subject line or anything in the email, and I've changed that all up, yeah, I would definitely add in reverse DNS. And it doesn't hurt to just do it anyway.
Do you typically create new domains or use expired domains?
New ones. Yes.
What was the most common
Oh, sorry.
text that was successful for you?
One that I did recently that was pretty successful was I pretended to be the IT help desk services for a target, and I told them that recently we had a bout of malware like come through our email gateway and that some people might be infected, but in this case, we might need their help to like download anti-malware. So I cloned Malwarebytes website basically, and then set a link to it from like a clone version of their usual employee login page. And so they log in into their employee login page with their regular employee credentials, and it's just like, oh, here's what we use for anti-malware. So they click on the link, and then it looks like the same executable that Malwarebytes uses, and then a lot of people ran that. So, and it looked legitimate because it's like a common thing that people use for anti-malware. It's kind of mean, but so yeah, that one was really successful. Sorry, what was your question?
Earlier you talked about like if you get one of your pretexts, if it gets blocked, like by Microsoft's junk or spam folder, do you find it more that, because I have some that I've done that did, and like changing either the subject line or if you're faking where the mail is from, your thoughts on which category Microsoft might trigger on the most?
Yeah, so I don't know about Microsoft in particular, but definitely when you're spoofing who it's coming from, that I find that those get blocked quite often. And then the subject line, if you use like all caps or certain words, those might definitely get blocked. I did have I couldn't figure one out, and it was taking me like days, and then I realized that I had put the subject line in all caps, and I was like, oh, that's it. Change that and it's fine. So sometimes you have to do a little trial and error just to see if it's going to get through. And if you can't spoof who it's from, then you just have to try to do a little more research on your target and think of like who it could be from, even if it's at your phishing domain that they might trust or maybe overlook. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you everyone.